First, Madam Chair, I want to observe that we mispronounced the word recreation. It really is recreation. And that is the essence of what we're talking about here, is the recreation of people's hearts and souls when they enter the outdoors. And I think it's important. That word is, it's recreation. That's not what it is. It's recreation. Anyway, first, Mr. Bannon, you mentioned 300,000 people have done NOLS trips. My son was one of them some 30 years ago. It was an extraordinary experience. Madam Chair, it was on Prince William Sound in Alaska. And it was a really signal experience in this young man's life. So I want to thank you for what NOLS does for 300,000 plus people around the country.
Thank you, Senator.
More substantively, there's a theme here that bothers me. We had a hearing a couple of weeks ago. Senator Cassidy has a bill to increase staffing at FERC to process certain permits. Here we're talking about bills to increase staffing and be able to respond more promptly and efficiently to permits. The bottom line is the federal government can't work if there's nobody to answer the phone. And we're going through a period where bureaucrat is a dirty word, and where we have hiring freezes and freezes of salary, no raises, and yet here we are talking about delays in permitting because somebody, I think you said, was doing something else, had a land transfer, couldn't do the permits. I just think we need to realize this is part. I suspect you could have this same hearing in practically any committee at the Department of Agriculture, Inland Fish and Wildlife, anywhere in the federal government that processes, the IRS, that processes complaints and permitting applications from our citizens. So I just think it's important to point out, Madam Chair, that you can't have it both ways. You can't bullyrag bureaucrats and then complain that permits aren't being granted in a timely fashion. I just think that's an important point, and I'm seeing a pattern develop here. Finally, a specific question. Mr. McGuire, I'm curious about this bill, and Senator Gardner isn't here. In section, I think it's 5A3, it talks about what the money can be used for, and most of the discussion has been for administrative costs, reducing permitting time, staffing up the agencies. No problem there. But then it talks about other things it can be used for. It says interpretation activities, visitor information, visitor services, and signage to enhance the ski area visitor. Could you buy a new chairlift with this money?
No.
Could you build a road through your ski area or to your ski area?
A ski company could submit an application to the Forest Service.
But Senator Gardner was talking about,
you're
talking about increasing your infrastructure of your ski area. What does that mean? I'm a little concerned that we're talking about federal money being given to a profit-making organization. There's no matching requirement or anything. What could it be used for? What does that mean, visitor services?
So I think first and foremost, I do want to note, none of these dollars will be used to pay for or buy infrastructure for a private company. It's purely to the...
That's what you just, but earlier, you've used the word infrastructure about 5 times today. So did Senator Gardner.
I mean, when I say infrastructure, I mean the permitting and processes, the NEPA process that a company must go through, a permit team must go through in order to be able to make that investment.
Well, this money would go to pay the costs of the ski area in preparing their application? Is that what you're saying?
No, currently ski areas pay for all the environmental work that go through cost recovery. I don't anticipate this going. When the Forest Service contracts that work out to a third party, they must necessarily accept the work of that third party back into the federal government. That takes the Forest Service's own biologists.
Well, I just want to go on record as being concerned about this term, the visitor services. I don't know what that means, because I've gathered through this discussion today that we're talking about things that enhance the visitor experience. In fact, that's what it says. Right. And then it also says, oddly enough, it forbids using this money for fire suppression or for land acquisition to fill out an area in the area. I just find this whole provision a little disturbing. And Madam Chair, I just want to, when we get to markup, I'd like some more information, because it says interpretation activities, visitor information, visitor services, and signage. That's a pretty, visitor service is a pretty broad term, and I want to know what that means, because I don't think we should be funding a new chairlift, or if we are going to fund that kind of thing, there at least should be some kind of matching requirement and other limitations. Mr. McGuire, you want to respond?
Certainly not the intent of this legislation to subsidize any actual infrastructure. When we say visitor services, we mean things such as signage that lets visitors know they're on their national forest.
That's fine.
When we say visitor services, we mean having law enforcement available, Forest Service law enforcement available to visit. This means having the ability for rangers to be out on the forest, on the ski area.
If that's what we're
working with
talking
the
about, I
guests.
don't think we have any problem. I'm
Yep.
just worried about the vagueness of the language. And I am worried, I don't quite understand why the money couldn't be used for forest fire suppression on that unit. It seems to me that would be something we would want to do, wouldn't it?
I think the concern would be that the fire suppression needs are so great that it could quickly take everything.
I see. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.